Your card has been declined, sir. The words seemed to slice through the golden silence of the five-star restaurant. Heads turned from every corner, whispers rippling like waves across the velvet room. The billionaire, polished suit, diamond watch, and the reputation of a man who owned everything, froze. For the first time in years, his power slipped. The waiter's hand trembled slightly as he held out the sleek black card. The billionaire snatched it back, his jaw tightening, eyes darting as if daring anyone to laugh. But the silence was louder than laughter. And then, from the very back of the room, a small voice rose. Clear, innocent, unafraid. "I can pay for you." Gasps erupted. A poor little girl, no older than 8, stepped forward. Her shoes were worn, her dress faded, yet her eyes shone with a quiet confidence. The billionaire blinked, stunned, certain he had misheard. But no. She repeated it louder this time. "I'll pay for you." The room tilted. A billionaire brought low, and a child offering to lift him up. No one in that glittering room could have guessed what would happen next. For years, Richard Vance had been untouchable. A billionaire who moved through the world like he owned not just businesses, but entire cities. His name was stamped on skyscrapers, his private jet painted across magazine covers. His smile flashed in newspapers beside prime ministers and kings. People didn't question Richard Vance, they bowed, applauded, envied. But behind the spotless headlines and the glimmering watch on his wrist, Richard lived a life few truly saw. Alone at the top, burdened by endless deals and faceless dinners, his empire ran on numbers, and numbers were the only thing he trusted. That evening, inside the grandest restaurant of the city, Richard sat surrounded by glittering chandeliers and velvet curtains. Every plate cost more than most families earned in a week. Waiters bowed, violinists played softly in the corner, and guests stole glances, whispering, "That's him. That's the billionaire." And then, in one cruel instant, his carefully constructed world cracked. The card declined. The whispers grew. The pride he had spent a lifetime building began to wobble on a knife's edge. At another table, half hidden near the back, sat a little girl. Clothes too big for her frame, hair tied in a rough braid, her shoes scuffed from long streets walked. She had come here not to eat, but simply to stay warm, unnoticed. Yet somehow, fate had placed her in the very room where a billionaire's pride was collapsing. When her small voice cut through the silence, offering to pay, it wasn't just an interruption. It was the first spark of a story no one could have imagined. The billionaire blinked, certain he had misheard. His fortune could buy islands, companies, entire countries' worth of land. And yet here, in this gilded hall, it was a child barefoot in worn shoes, offering him help. Gasps fluttered like startled birds. A waiter froze mid-step, tray trembling in his hands. The violinist stopped playing. All eyes locked on the small figure who had dared to speak. Richard straightened in his chair, his face tightening into the cold mask of power he had perfected over decades. "You?" His voice was sharp, cutting through the silence. "Do you even know what a bill in this place costs?" The little girl's chin didn't waver. Her voice, though soft, carried across the room. "I don't, but I know it's more than I have. Still, I can give you what I do." Her words landed like stones in a pond, rippling outward. Whispers broke out. Laughter sputtered from a corner. Someone muttered, "She's crazy." But Richard leaned forward. For the first time in years, someone had spoken to him without fear, without calculation. He studied her, the frayed hem of her dress, the determination in her eyes that didn't belong to a child of her age. She had nothing, yet she stood taller than the millionaires who bowed at his feet. "Why?" he asked finally, his tone quieter now, tinged with genuine confusion. "Why would you help me?" The girl clasped her small hands in front of her. "Because you looked embarrassed. And I know what that feels like." The room stilled again. A billionaire exposed. A child offering dignity. And somewhere deep inside Richard Vance, a crack widened. One that no amount of money had ever touched before. But the world was watching. Pride battled with curiosity, and the tension in the air coiled tighter. The question was no longer about money. It was about something far more dangerous, his heart. The laughter in the restaurant grew louder. Some guests smirked behind their menus. Others whispered cruel jokes. A billionaire humiliated. A child daring to rescue him. The contrast was too much for them to resist. Richard's cheeks burned, not from poverty, but from pride. For a man who had silenced boardrooms with a glance, this moment was unbearable. He slammed the sleek black card onto the table so hard that glasses rattled. Enough! His voice thundered, startling even the waiters. I don't need your pity, child. Do you have any idea who I am? The little girl flinched but didn't back away. Her small voice rose again, steady as a candle flame in a storm. Yes, you're the man who looked sad when they said no. And I thought maybe someone should say yes. Her words pierced deeper than any insult. For the first time in decades, Richard felt stripped bare. Around him, the audience of strangers leaned closer, hungry for the spectacle. Pride screamed at him to end this, to throw her out, to reclaim control. But another voice, quieter, dangerous, unfamiliar, whispered inside him. Asterisk, what if she's right? What if this child sees something no one else does? Asterisk. He stared at her, this girl with nothing but courage, standing in a hall of wealth. And the weight of his empire suddenly felt small compared to the weight of her gaze. Yet the conflict tore at him. Billionaire pride demanded dominance. Human heart longed for connection. Which would win? The restaurant waited, breathless, as Richard Vance prepared his answer. An answer that would change everything. The air inside the restaurant was razor thin. Every eye waited for the billionaire's next word. Every breath held as though the city itself leaned closer. Richard Vance's chest heaved, his fists tight against the polished table. He was a man about to explode or crumble. The little girl didn't blink. She reached into her faded pocket and pulled out a few coins, dull copper that clinked softly in her palm. She walked forward, past waiters frozen in place, and set them gently on the linen tablecloth in front of him. This is all I have, she said. It isn't much, but I want you to have it, so you don't feel alone. The restaurant fell into a silence so heavy it hurt. No laughter, no whispers, just the sound of Richard's own heartbeat hammering in his ears. A billionaire, drowning in pride, staring at the offering of a child who had nothing, and yet gave everything. His vision blurred. For years he had signed deals worth billions, bought palaces, silenced rivals. And not once had he felt the weight of sincerity like this. The coins glowed on the table brighter than all the diamonds on his wrist. Richard's lips trembled, his throat locked. Then, before he could stop himself, a sound escaped. A choked laugh mixed with something far more dangerous. A sob. The crowd gasped. The mighty billionaire, brought to his knees not by failure, not by enemies, but by the courage of a little girl who refused to let him drown in shame. And in that moment, Richard Vance knew nothing would ever be the same again. For the first time in his life, Richard Vance couldn't speak. His fortune, his empire, his pride, all felt weightless compared to the handful of coins resting before him. Slowly, with trembling fingers, he picked them up. The entire restaurant watched as the billionaire, who had once dismissed kings and crushed rivals, bowed his head to a little girl. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice breaking. "You've given me more than money ever could." The girl smiled, small and genuine. "Everyone needs help sometimes," she replied simply, as though it were the most natural truth in the world. Richard rose from his chair, a different man than the one who had sat down minutes earlier. Turning to the stunned waiter, he pulled out a second card from his wallet. A card no one had seen him use in years. Swiped clean. Approved. The meal was paid, but that no longer mattered. What mattered was the lesson he had learned. He walked to the girl, bent on one knee, and asked softly, "What's your name?" Her answer was shy, but steady. And in that moment, Richard made a promise. She would never walk hungry again. From that day forward, he would ensure her life was filled with the opportunities money could buy, and the dignity her courage had earned. As the two walked out of the restaurant together, The silence broke into applause. Not for the billionaire, for the child. Because everyone in that golden hall knew they had witnessed something rare. Powerful man humbled, and a little girl who proved that true wealth isn't counted in dollars, but in kindness. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more emotional and life-changing stories.